I am Ava Chen, a senior partner at Sterling Thorne, one of the most prestigious law firms on Wall Street. Just 48 hours ago, I was leading a $9 billion merger. Now I am a prisoner in my own home, shackled by a GPS ankle monitor, accused of treason by the very firm where I devoted 20 years of my career. The man beside me, the husband I trusted completely, is the demon who set this trap. He has isolated me, forced me into silence, and tried to steal the greatest achievement of my life. But he made one fatal mistake. He thought the ankle monitor could cage me, but the microphone inside has turned it into the perfect bait. He wants to hear me break? Fine. He forgot that I am a lawyer. I will give him exactly what he wants to hear, an elaborate trap of my own design. He wants to turn my life into a tragedy, but I will be the one directing this story. And in my story, the villain never gets a happy ending. The cold, hard plastic snapped shut around my ankle with a click that echoed the closing of a cell door. It was a sound of finality, a percussive end to the life I knew. I stared down at the gray, bulky device, an ugly parasite latched onto my skin. It was a GPS ankle monitor, the kind of thing you see on defendants in crime dramas, not on a senior partner at Sterling Thorne, one of the most prestigious law firms on Wall Street. Not on me, Ava Chen. The perimeter is set to the property line, a man in a cheap suit said, his voice flat and bored. He was from the monitoring service, a cog in the machine that was currently grinding my life into dust. Any attempt to cross it or tamper with the device will trigger an immediate alert to the authorities and your firm. You understand? I didn't answer. I just nodded, my gaze fixed on the device. My mind, trained to deconstruct contracts and find loopholes and impenetrable clauses, was already analyzing it. Weight, approximately 150 grams. Material, polycarbonate blend. Technology, GPS likely with cellular connectivity. Power source, internal, rechargeable. I cataloged the details, a futile attempt to impose order on the chaos that had consumed me. Just 48 hours ago, I was in the boardroom on the 82nd floor, commanding a team of associates, orchestrating the final push for the Axiom Helix merger, a deal worth $9 billion. Today, I was a prisoner in my own 4-story Manhattan brownstone, accused of being the leak that sank it. The man from the monitoring service left, closing the heavy oak door behind him with a quiet thud. The silence that followed was immense. It pressed in on me, suffocating. I stood alone in my foyer, the cool Italian marble under my feet feeling alien, the sweeping staircase that I'd always loved now looking like the bars of a gilded cage. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus Thorne, the firm's managing partner. A man I had considered a mentor. His text was brutally efficient, just like him. Ava, the partners have convened. You are on indefinite, unpaid leave pending the outcome of the internal and federal investigations. All firm access has been revoked. Do not contact any clients. Do not contact any employees other than through your legal counsel. My legal counsel. The firm had assigned me a junior partner, a kid named Peterson who I wouldn't trust to handle a parking ticket. It was an insult wrapped in procedure. They weren't protecting me, they were containing me. I walked into my home office, a room lined with law books and accolades, a testament to 2 decades of 60-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends. My laptop was dark. I tried to log in. Access denied. They had already severed the connection, cutting me off from my work, my files, my entire professional identity. My husband, Julian, found me there, staring at the blank screen. Ava, honey? His voice was soft, laced with a practiced concern that, until recently, I had always found comforting. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. He was handsome, charismatic, the rising star at our biggest competitor, Vance and McDowell. Our marriage was a Wall Street power couple cliché, a constant dance of ambition and affection. It's a nightmare, he murmured into my hair. I talked to my people. They said the evidence is circumstantial, but it looks bad. An anonymous tip, encrypted data transfers traced back to your home network. I stiffened. It wasn't me, Julian, you know that. Of course I do. He squeezed me tighter. We'll fight this. You are the smartest lawyer I know. We'll find out who did this and we will make them pay. His words were meant to be a balm, but they felt like sandpaper on raw skin. A week ago, when the first whispers of a leak started, he'd been my rock, my late-night strategy partner. We sat at our kitchen island, glasses of Pinot Noir in hand, mapping out the possible culprits within my firm. He was so helpful, so supportive. Too supportive. A cold dread, an idea so monstrous I had refused to even let it form, began to crystallize in my mind. The data that was leaked was obscure, a specific set of due diligence files that only a handful of people knew the significance of. Its release didn't just kill the deal. It positioned Vance and McDowell perfectly to acquire a weakened Axiom at a fraction of the price. The biggest beneficiary of my downfall was the man currently holding me in his arms. "I just can't believe it," I said, my voice carefully neutral as I pulled away from his embrace. "Someone had to have access to my home network, someone I trust." I watched his face for a flicker, a crack in the concerned facade. Nothing. His expression was a masterpiece of loving empathy. He was good. He was a phenomenal lawyer, after all. "It has to be someone from your firm," he said, shaking his head with theatrical sorrow. "Someone jealous of your success will prove it. I'll hire the best private investigators, the best forensic team." He was offering to fund my defense, to fight for me. It was the perfect play, the devoted husband standing by his wrongly accused wife. Who would ever suspect him? "The firm took my laptop, my phone," I said, sinking into my leather office chair. "They've cut me off completely." "We'll get you new ones," he said instantly. "Whatever you need. We're a team, remember?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had loved for 10 years, the man I had built a life with, the man whose competitive streak I had always found thrilling, not threatening. Had I been that blind? "Remember our anniversary last year?" he asked, his voice softening, changing the subject. He walked over to the digital art frame on my wall, which was currently displaying a swirling, abstract pattern of code. "You gave me that ridiculous NFT, the eternal contract. You said it was a blockchain promise that you'd always be my partner in business and in life." I remembered. It was a silly, extravagant gift, a piece of crypto art I'd commissioned, embedding a simple, encrypted message into the metadata, "Yours always." It was a nod to our digital world, a modern-day love letter. At the time, he'd laughed, calling it the most lawyerly romantic gesture he'd ever seen. "I remember," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That's what we are, Ava." "An eternal contract," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "This is just a hostile takeover attempt on our life, and we don't lose those." He smiled, a confident, reassuring smile that had won over juries and closed billion-dollar deals. But for the first time, all I saw was the shark beneath the surface. He left for work a few minutes later, kissing my forehead and promising to call his contacts. The moment the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The mask of the grieving wife fell away, replaced by the cold, hard focus of a litigator. He had framed me. I didn't have proof, not yet, but I knew it with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. He had used our life, our home, our trust as weapons against me. And this ankle monitor, this house arrest, it wasn't just the firm's doing. It was his. He needed me isolated, silenced, and helpless while he closed the deal of a lifetime. He needed me in a cage. I looked down at the gray plastic band again. A cage. A very sophisticated, technologically advanced cage, but they made one critical mistake. My husband, my firm, the entire system that had turned against me, they left me with my mind. And my mind was now a weapon aimed directly at them. The game was on, and I don't lose. My first 24 hours under house arrest were a study in methodical patience. I was an animal in a new enclosure, testing the boundaries, observing the patterns of my keeper. Julian left at precisely 7:30 a.m., just as he always had. He returned at 6:45 p.m., carrying a bag from our favorite Italian place and a bottle of expensive Barolo. He was the perfect picture of a husband trying to maintain normalcy in the face of crisis. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous kitchen. I was sitting at the marble island, a legal pad in front of me, though I hadn't written a word. "Quiet," I said. "Long. Any news?" "Peterson called," I said, referring to my court-appointed lawyer. "He's filing a motion to get the preliminary evidence from the firm. He sounds optimistic." It was a lie. Peterson sounded overwhelmed and out of his depth, but I needed to know what Julian would do with that information. "That's good. That's a start," Julian said, uncorking the wine. He didn't ask for details. He didn't probe about the evidence. An innocent man, a husband desperate to help his wife, would have been full of questions. Julian just accepted it, because he already knew exactly what the evidence was. He had manufactured it. While he was gone, I had conducted a full inventory of my prison. 4 floors, 12 rooms, 37 windows, all of them now useless portals to a world I couldn't touch. But I wasn't looking for an escape route. Not a physical one anyway. I was looking for a weapon. I found it in my son's old room. Liam was 19 now, a sophomore at Stanford, and his room was mostly a shrine to his childhood. On a dusty shelf, tucked behind a row of debate team trophies, was his old Nintendo Switch. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a long shot, a ridiculous, desperate hope, but it had a web browser. It had a messaging system. And it was a device Julian would never in a million years think to check. I found the charger and plugged it in. The screen flickered to life with a cheerful jingle that sounded like a war horn in the silent house. I connected it to the guest Wi-Fi network, the password for which was burned into my memory, Axiom Helix Merger 2023. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. Now for the hard part. Contact. I needed my own team, my own counsel. And there was only one person I trusted implicitly. Leo Martinez. He was an IT intern at the firm, a kid from the Bronx with a brain that moved at the speed of light. I discovered him languishing in the tech support basement, his talents wasted on resetting passwords. I saw the genius in his code and pulled him onto my team for the Axiom deal, had him build the secure data room from scratch. He was fiercely loyal, not just to the firm, but to me. I navigated to the Switch's friend list. Liam had hundreds of friends, a chaotic jumble of usernames. I scrolled, my breath held tight in my chest, searching for a name I'd only seen once when Leo had proudly shown me his custom-coded indie game on the device. L3XC0D3X. Lex Codex. Law of the code, it was so perfectly him. I sent a message. My fingers, usually so steady on a keyboard, trembled slightly. Need to discuss a pro bono case. Highly confidential. Attorney-client privilege applies. It was a risk. If anyone else saw it, it would seem like a strange prank. But I was banking on Leo's intelligence. I was banking on him understanding the subtext. For 10 agonizing minutes, there was nothing. I sat on the floor of my son's room, the small screen glowing in my hands, feeling the full weight of my isolation. Maybe he'd left the firm. Maybe he thought it was spam. Maybe my one long shot had missed. Then, a notification popped up. A message from L3XC0D3X. Understood. Awaiting instructions. Communications are not secure on this channel. Suggest we move to a more robust platform. Standing by, tears welled in my eyes, hot and sharp. It wasn't just relief. It was the first glimmer of hope, the first crack of light in a very dark room. I wasn't alone. The next evening, Julian came home with a gift. He placed a sleek silver laptop on the kitchen island, the newest model, top of the line. "I know you feel cut off," he said, his hand resting on my back. "I figured you could use this. It's a clean machine, brand new, not connected to the firm in any way. You can start working on your defense, do your research." It was a beautiful trap. A listening device, a keylogger, a direct window into my strategy, all wrapped up in a bow of husbandly devotion. "Julian, this is too much," I said, feigning overwhelmed gratitude. I ran my hand over the cool metal. "Nothing is too much for you," he said, kissing me. "Now you can fight back." "Oh, I will," I thought. "Just not the way you think." Later that night, long after he was asleep, I was back in Liam's room. On the Switch, Leo had sent me a set of complex instructions. He had set up a heavily encrypted virtual private network that routed through a series of offshore servers. It was a digital fortress. He also gave me a shopping list. The next day, I used the clean laptop Julian had given me to make a series of mundane online purchases delivered by a same-day service. Groceries. A new set of bed linens, a yoga mat, and buried among them a Raspberry Pi, a tiny credit card-sized computer, a specific brand of USB drive, and a cheap, prepaid burner phone. Julian was listening, I was sure of it, so I had to make my real moves look like background noise. The delivery arrived in a flurry of boxes, which I unpacked while humming to myself. My real work began after he left the next morning. Using the burner phone's data connection and the instructions Leo had provided, I set up the Raspberry Pi. It was my new, truly clean machine, a ghost in the network. From it, I accessed the dark web browser Leo had directed me to and opened our new secure chat. My first message was simple: "I'm in." Leo's reply was instantaneous. "Good, first things first. We need to know what we're up against. The firm's security is a nightmare, but I built the back end. I know the cracks." "But I need your partner credentials to get in." "They've been revoked," I typed back. "They've been suspended," he corrected. "There's a difference. They still exist in the system. I can use them to create a ghost profile, something that can move through the servers without tripping alarms, but I need the password." I typed it out. "Iquitas veritas vincit." Equity, truth conquers, the motto of my law school. Got it. I'm starting the infiltration. It will take time. In the meantime, you need to be careful. "You're being watched. I assume you know the new laptop is compromised?" "I do." "Good, but there's something else." A pause. "What model is your ankle monitor?" I froze. I'd been so focused on the digital surveillance that I hadn't given the physical hardware a second thought, beyond its geographical limitations. I walked back to my office and used Julian's bugged laptop for some harmless research. I looked up the monitoring service, found their government contracts, and cross-referenced the device models. It took me 20 minutes to find the technical spec sheet. I scanned through pages of jargon, GPS accuracy, battery life, tamper resistance, and then I saw it, a feature listed under emergency protocols. Live audio transmission capability. It could be activated remotely by the monitoring agency or by a court order. A tiny, nearly invisible pinprick on the side of the casing was the microphone. My blood ran cold. The device wasn't just tracking my location. It could be listening to me. To every phone call, every conversation, every whispered word. I thought back to my conversation with Peterson, my useless lawyer, my conversation with the grocery delivery guy, my humming. I thought back to every single word I had spoken to Julian since this nightmare began. He hadn't just built a cage, he had bugged it. He was listening to the animal inside, waiting for it to show weakness, waiting for it to give up. I went back to my secure chat with Leo. "It's a Veridian Series 4, I typed, my fingers numb. Leo's response came a second later, and it confirmed my deepest fear. "Ava, that's not just a tracker, it's a microphone, it's always on. The world tilted on its axis. It's always on." The words pulsed in my mind, a frantic, sickening rhythm. Every sigh, every muttered frustration, every rustle of paper in my office, he had heard it all. Julian wasn't just my jailer, he was my confessor, listening from the other side of a one-way mirror. The feeling of violation was absolute. It was a deeper betrayal than the frame-up itself. He had invaded the last private space I had left, the air I breathed. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to tear the device off my leg, smash it with a hammer, silence it, but I choked down the rage. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Anger was a resource to be weaponized, not wasted. I was a lawyer. I had to think like one. I had to assume everything I said and did was being recorded and presented to a hostile jury of one. My life had become a performance. I walked out of Liam's room, leaving my ghost machine, the Raspberry Pi, hidden in a hollowed-out textbook. I went downstairs to the kitchen and made a pot of tea, my movements deliberately calm. I picked up the landline, a device I hadn't used in years, but one I now realized was a potential stage, and called my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice bright, chipper, and utterly fake. "Just calling to check in. Everything's fine here. A bit of a mess at work, but it's just a misunderstanding. Julian is being an absolute saint through all of this. I don't know what I'd do without him." I could almost feel him listening, savoring my performance. Let him think I was the dutiful, clueless wife leaning on her strong husband. Let him get comfortable. My new reality required a new set of rules. Rule 1, the house is a stage. Every word spoken aloud is for Julian's benefit. Rule 2, the bugged laptop is a prop. Every search, every email sent from it is misdirection. Rule 3, the real work happens in silence, in the shadows, through the ghost machine. I began to lead a double life within the confines of my own home. Outwardly, I was a woman falling apart. I used Julian's laptop to search for defense attorneys who specialized in white-collar crime, leaving a browser history full of panicked queries. I made tearful phone calls to my sister, lamenting how lost I was. I even started a journal, a physical book left conspicuously on my bedside table, filled with entries about my despair and my undying gratitude for Julian's support. But late at night, in the silent darkness of my son's room, another Ava emerged. The real Ava. The one who was hunting. On the secure chat, Leo was my lifeline. He was my eyes and ears inside the firm I was banished from. "I'm in," he messaged me 3 nights after our initial contact. "The ghost profile is active. I look like a routine security audit bot. No one will notice me unless they're looking for me specifically." "What am I looking for?" The leak, I typed. "Find the origin point." The data was transferred from my home network, but it had to be pulled from the firm's servers first. Find the request. It would have been a massive data packet, terabytes worth. It would have left a footprint. Already on it, he replied. "But Ava, they're good." They routed the download through a cascade of proxies, made it look like it came from an IP address in Eastern Europe. They knew exactly how to cover their tracks. "Julian knows how to cover his tracks," I corrected. "He helped design the security protocols for a dozen tech mergers. He knows the system as well as we do." "Better, maybe," Leo admitted. "But he doesn't know me." While Leo hunted in the digital world, I focused on the physical, the ankle monitor. It was my chain, but it was also a direct link to my enemy. If it was listening, what else could it do? My public, performative self used Julian's laptop to research the legalities of ankle monitoring. My private self, on the Raspberry Pi, dug into hacker forums and tech manuals. I learned that the Veridian Series 4 had a diagnostic mode, accessible with a specific sequence of commands sent via a low-frequency radio signal. It was designed for technicians, a backdoor for maintenance. It was my way in. I needed a transmitter. My online shopping charade continued. I ordered a soldering iron, some copper wire, and a handful of microcontrollers, burying them in an order for expensive gardening supplies. To Julian, I was a bored, wealthy woman taking up a new hobby. In reality, I was building a crude, short-range radio. My office became my workshop. By day, I read novels and watched daytime television. By night, I hunched over a workbench, the faint smell of solder filling the air, my hands working with a precision I usually reserved for dissecting legal documents. It took me a week of painstaking work, following obscure online tutorials, but I finally had it. A small, ugly device that could, in theory, talk to my ankle monitor. I'm ready to try and access the monitor's diagnostic port, I told Leo. What am I looking for? Logs, he replied instantly. Every action the device takes is logged. GPS pings, battery status, and most importantly, remote activations. If Julian is using that microphone, there will be a record of when it was turned on and from where. And if I get caught, then the device will send a tamper alert, and your house will be swarming with cops in 5 minutes. No pressure. That night, I waited until 2 a.m. The house was still, the only sound the low hum of the city outside. I sat on the floor, the makeshift transmitter in my hand, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I took a deep breath and sent the first command. A tiny LED on the ankle monitor, one I had never noticed before, blinked green. Success! I was in. My fingers flew across the keyboard of my ghost machine, inputting the commands Leo had given me. I was pulling the raw data logs, a stream of impenetrable code filling my screen. It was like drinking from a fire hose. Thousands of lines of data, timestamps, system checks. I spent the next hour sifting, filtering, searching for one specific event code, REM audio ACT, remote audio activation. And then I found it, a cluster of entries. The first one was dated 48 hours ago, just minutes after the device was fitted to my ankle. The activation signal was traced to an IP address. I ran a quick search. The IP address was registered to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, a dead end, but the subsequent activations were different. There were dozens of them. Each one corresponded to a time I had been on the phone or when Julian had been home talking to me, and the IP addresses for these activations weren't hidden. They were coming from a single, static IP. My hands went cold. I knew that IP address. I had set it up myself years ago. It was the dedicated IP address for the secure server in the basement of Vance and McDowell, Julian's firm. He wasn't just listening, he was listening from his office. He was sitting at his desk in the heart of our greatest rival, monitoring my every word as part of his corporate conquest. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it stole my breath. I copied the logs, encrypted them, and sent them to Leo. His reply was a single word, checkmate, but it wasn't, not yet. This was proof of surveillance, proof that Julian was acting unethically, illegally even, but it wasn't proof that he had framed me for the leak. A good lawyer, and Julian was a great lawyer, would argue he was a concerned husband using his resources to monitor a wife he believed might be a flight risk or a danger to herself. It was despicable, but it wouldn't exonerate me. I needed the smoking gun. I needed to connect him directly to the data transfer. Leo, I typed, my mind racing. The Axiom data room. You built it. Is there anything in the code, any signature? Something that could only have come from you? There was a long pause on the other end. Yes, he finally wrote. Every file that was downloaded has an invisible watermark embedded in the metadata. A string of code. It was my little signature. It reads, property of Leo Martinez. If found, please return to the Bronx. A smile, the first genuine smile in weeks, spread across my face. Can you search for that watermark outside our servers? On the open web, on the dark web, anywhere. I can build a spider to crawl for it, he replied. But Ava, that's like searching for one specific grain of sand on every beach in the world. Then you'd better start digging, I typed. As I was about to sign off, another thought struck me. A memory of Julian standing in my office talking about our anniversary, the NFT, the eternal contract. Leo, I wrote. I need you to teach me how to analyze the metadata of an NFT. That's random, he replied. Humor me. The cage was still locked. The guard was still listening. But now I knew how he was listening, and I had a plan. The performance was about to enter its final act, and this time I was the one writing the script. The next phase of the plan required an accomplice, someone inside my gilded cage, someone Julian saw as utterly insignificant. That someone was Maria, my housekeeper for the past 8 years. Maria was a quiet, observant woman from Ecuador who came twice a week. She saw everything and said nothing. She had seen the tension in our marriage long before I had. I'd seen it in her eyes, a flicker of sympathy, a carefully neutral expression when Julian would make a casually cruel remark disguised as a joke. He treated her like part of the furniture, barely acknowledging her presence unless he needed something. That was his mistake. When she arrived on Tuesday, I was in the kitchen, staging another tearful phone call. "I just don't know what to do, Sylvia," I sobbed into the receiver to my sister. "The legal bills are going to be astronomical. I might have to sell some of my jewelry." I saw Maria pause in the doorway, her cleaning caddy in hand. Her eyes met mine for a brief second. I gave her the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. It was the signal we had arranged through a series of coded messages passed via Liam's Nintendo Switch and a burner phone I'd had Leo order for her. Later, while Julian was at work, Maria came to my office. She didn't speak. She knew about the microphone. Instead, she handed me a small, velvet pouch. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from Julian on our 5th anniversary. I took them and handed her back a different pouch. This one contained a burner phone, a USB drive containing the monitor logs I'd downloaded, and a handwritten note. The note was simple. It contained the address of a private investigator named Frank Miller. Frank was an old bulldog, an ex-NYPD detective who now worked for the kind of people who needed problems to disappear quietly. I'd used him once, years ago, to vet a potential hire who had a suspiciously clean background. Frank had uncovered a history of corporate espionage that saved the firm millions. He was expensive, discreet, and owed me a favor. Maria slipped the pouch into her pocket and left, her face a mask of quiet efficiency. She was my carrier pigeon, my only link to the outside world that Julian couldn't trace. With the logs in Frank's hands, I turned my attention to the next piece of the puzzle, the NFT. Leo had walked me through the basics of blockchain analysis. It was a world of cryptographic hashes, smart contracts, and distributed ledgers. It was dense, complex, and utterly fascinating. It was a new kind of law, written in code. Every transaction, every change to an NFT is recorded permanently on the blockchain, he'd explained over our secure chat. It's called immutability. You can't erase the history. Think of it as a perfect chain of custody. My gift to Julian, the eternal contract, was a unique token on the Ethereum blockchain. I still had the original transaction hash from when I'd purchased it. Using a blockchain explorer, a public search engine for crypto transactions, I could view its entire history. On Julian's bugged laptop, my search history showed I was researching how to sell NFTs and crypto art appraisal. I was creating a narrative, the desperate wife looking to liquidate assets. On my ghost machine, I was a digital archaeologist, digging through layers of code. The initial transaction was there, my wallet transferring funds to the artist, and the NFT being minted and transferred to me. Then, the next transaction, me transferring the NFT to Julian's crypto wallet as a gift. The public record stopped there. As far as the world knew, the eternal contract still sat in his wallet, a dormant symbol of our love. But Leo had taught me to look deeper. He wouldn't have touched the original token, Leo typed. That would be too obvious, but a smart contract can be layered. You can attach new functions to an existing NFT without altering the original. It's like adding a hidden clause to a signed document. Following his guidance, I started examining the smart contract associated with my NFT. And there, buried under layers of standard code, was something new. A secondary contract had been attached to it 3 weeks ago, just days before the Axiom Helix leak. It was a highly sophisticated piece of code, something Julian must have hired a specialist to write. It was a dead man's switch. The contract was coded to execute a specific action if a certain condition was met. The condition was tied to the trading price of Axiom stock. If the stock price dropped below a certain threshold, the exact threshold it hit the day after the leak, the switch would be triggered. And what was the action it would execute? It would transfer the entire multi-terabyte package of stolen Axiom data from an encrypted, decentralized storage system, a digital vault in the cloud, to a new, anonymous crypto wallet. It was Julian's masterpiece of a contingency plan. He hadn't just framed me. He had created an automated blockchain-verified escape hatch for the stolen data. If anything happened to him, if he was caught or betrayed, the data would be automatically released to his anonymous buyer. It was his insurance policy. But he had made one arrogant, fatal mistake. He had used the gift I gave him, our symbol of eternal partnership, as the key to his entire scheme. The poetry of it was almost beautiful in its cruelty. I had the how. I had the what. I still didn't have the final, irrefutable proof that it was him who had initiated the original data theft. The dead man's switch was a contingency, not a confession. That proof, I suspected, lay with the only other person Julian would trust with a secret of this magnitude. His own lawyer, a ruthless shark named Victoria Vance, the Vance in Vance and McDowell. Victoria wasn't just his colleague, she was his former mentor, and I had long suspected, his former lover. Their relationship was a legend in the Wall Street legal community, a bond forged in a crucible of ambition and shared secrets. Breaking Victoria was impossible. She was a fortress, but every fortress has a key. I needed to create a scenario where Julian would be forced to communicate with Victoria about the scheme. I needed to feed him bait so tempting he couldn't resist. My performance at home escalated. I became more erratic, more desperate. I left a half-empty bottle of whiskey on my desk. I made a call to a divorce lawyer, a call I knew Julian would overhear, and sobbed about being trapped and wanting out. I was pushing him, making him believe I was on the verge of breaking, of doing something unpredictable. Then came the centerpiece of the deception. Frank Miller, my pie, delivered. Maria brought me his report, tucked inside a bag of groceries. Frank had found something on Victoria Vance, something small but potentially explosive. Years ago, before she was a legal titan, she had been involved in a hit-and-run case. A cyclist had been injured. The case was quietly settled, the records sealed, but Frank, being Frank, had found the cyclist. And the cyclist was willing to talk. It wasn't enough to destroy her, but it was enough to spook her. It was a loose thread, and I was about to pull it. Using the burner phone Maria had, I sent an anonymous, untraceable text message to Victoria Vance. I know about the cyclist on Route 9. The records aren't as sealed as you think. Your friend Julian is in trouble, deeper than you know. You might want to review your exposure before you end up as collateral damage in his war. It was a bluff, a calculated risk. I was betting that Victoria's first instinct would be self-preservation, and that her first call would be to Julian. I sat in my office, the house silent around me, and waited. I pictured the text message lighting up her phone in her corner office overlooking Central Park. I pictured the blood draining from her face. Less than an hour later, my landline rang. It was Julian. His voice was tight, strained. "Ava, are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice thick with fake sleepiness. "Just checking in. Listen, something's come up at work. I'm going to have to stay late tonight, probably all night. A crisis with the Axiom deal." I knew it. He was going to meet her. My bait had been taken. "Oh, okay, honey," I said, my voice full of disappointment. "Stay safe." "Always," he said, and hung up. He thought he was going to a crisis meeting. He had no idea he was walking into my trap. The real performance was about to begin. And thanks to the microphone on my ankle, I had a front row seat. The silence in the house after Julian's call was different. It wasn't the oppressive, heavy silence of a prison anymore. It was the charged, electric silence of a stage before the curtain rises. He was on his way to meet Victoria, and I was betting everything on my prediction of what would happen next. I went to my office and sat in my leather chair, positioning myself near the landline. I knew Julian wouldn't be listening to the ankle monitor feed live. That was too risky. He would be accessing the recordings later, looking for anything suspicious. But I also knew Frank Miller. Frank wasn't just a pie, he was a master of subtle infiltration. His report hadn't just contained information about Victoria's hit-and-run. It had also contained a small, highly illegal piece of technology, a device that could piggyback on the ankle monitor's signal and give me a live, one-way audio feed from Julian's phone. It was Frank's own off-the-books insurance policy. "He's monitoring you, so you monitor him," his note had said. "The playing field should be level." I activated the device. It was a small, black box, now connected to a pair of noise-canceling headphones. I put them on and the world went quiet. Then, with a faint crackle, I was in. I could hear the muted roar of his Porsche's engine, the soft jazz playing on the radio. I was a ghost in his ear. He drove for 20 minutes. I heard him pull into an underground garage, the engine echoing off the concrete walls. A car door opened and closed. Then, the sound of his footsteps, crisp and urgent. A beep as he swiped a keycard, the quiet hum of an elevator. He wasn't at Vance and McDowell. He wasn't at a restaurant. Where was he? The elevator dinged, a door opened, and then I heard her voice, sharp and cold as shattered glass. "What the hell have you done, Julian?" It was Victoria Vance. "Tori, calm down," Julian said, his voice a low, placating murmur. "It's under control." "Under control?" she hissed. "I just got a text message talking about a cyclist on Route 9. A ghost from 15 years ago, and it mentioned you. Don't you dare tell me this is under control." They were in a private space, an apartment judging by the acoustics, her safe house probably. "It's Ava," Julian said, his voice hardening. "It has to be, she's getting desperate. She's flailing, trying to find anything to throw at us." "How could she possibly know about that? No one knows about that." "I don't know," he snapped. "Maybe she hired someone. The point is, she's not as broken as I thought. She's fighting back, which means we need to accelerate the timeline." My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid they could hear it through the connection. This was it, the conversation I had engineered. "Accelerate what?" Victoria demanded. "The Axiom deal is closing in 2 days. Your play worked. Ava is neutralized. The board is ready to sell to us. What is there to accelerate?" "The final transfer," Julian said. I could hear the faint clink of ice in a glass. He was pouring them drinks. "The data. The buyer is getting nervous. He wants possession now, not after the deal closes." "That's not the agreement. The agreement was the smart contract triggers after the acquisition is finalized. It's cleaner that way. No loose ends." "The loose end is my wife, who is apparently running her own Black Ops investigation from our brownstone." Julian's voice rose, tight with fury. "She got that text to you. What if she finds something else? What if she finds the NFT contract?" "She can't," Victoria said, but for the first time, a note of uncertainty crept into her voice. "That code is buried. It's untraceable." "Nothing is untraceable to Ava," he shot back. "You know her. She will burn the entire world to the ground to find a single piece of evidence. I need to move the data manually tonight. Take it out of the decentralized storage and deliver it to the buyer's dead drop. Wipe the smart contract. Erase the whole damn thing." There it was. A direct, verbal confirmation. He had the data. He controlled the smart contract. He was admitting to the entire conspiracy. I leaned forward, my entire body rigid, praying the recording was clean. "That's insane," Victoria said. "Moving that data manually is a huge risk. It creates a digital trail where there isn't one." The whole point of the blockchain was to create a transaction that was both automated and anonymous. "Plan has changed because the target is not behaving as predicted," Julian said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "I've underestimated her. I won't make that mistake again. I'm moving the data tonight with or without your approval." "And what about Ava?" Victoria asked. "What's the endgame here, Julian? She's not going to just accept a prison sentence. You know she'll appeal. She'll keep digging." There was a long, chilling silence. When Julian finally spoke, his voice was devoid of all emotion. It was the coldest, most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "The endgame," he said slowly, "is that once the deal is done and the money is cleared, Ava has an unfortunate accident, a tragic slip in the shower, a faulty wire in the kitchen. She's been so unstable lately, so depressed. I'm afraid she's become a danger to herself. It would be a terrible tragedy. But I, the grieving husband, would eventually recover, and I would be the sole beneficiary of her rather substantial estate." The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. He wasn't just trying to ruin me, he was going to kill me. The frame up, the house arrest, it was all just a prelude, a way to establish a narrative of my mental instability before he delivered the final act. "You're talking about murder," Victoria whispered, horrified. "I'm talking about risk management," he corrected her. "She is a loose end, and I do not leave loose ends." I ripped the headphones off, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Bile rose in my throat. I had known he was ruthless. I had known he was a monster, but I had never understood the depths of his depravity until this moment. This wasn't a corporate game anymore. This was a fight for my life. I stumbled out of the office and into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection stared back at me, a pale, haunted stranger. "He's going to kill you." I took a deep, shuddering breath. No, he was not. I went back to the office, my fear solidifying into a diamond-hard resolve. He had made his move. Now it was my turn. I logged into the secure chat with Leo. "Leo, I have it all on tape." I quickly typed out a summary of the conversation. "He's going to move the data tonight, and he's planning to kill me." Leo's response was a string of frantic messages. "AVA, get out of there. Call the police. Now." "No," I typed back, my fingers suddenly steady. "The police won't move fast enough, and Julian will deny everything." his word against mine. This recording is illegally obtained. It won't hold up in court without corroborating evidence. We have one shot to take him down, and we have to do it tonight, before he moves that data. What's the plan? He thinks I'm the target. He thinks I'm a mess. We're going to use that. He's going to move the data from a secure location. You need to find out where. How? I can't track his physical movements. No, but you can track his digital ones. He'll need to access the decentralized storage system to initiate the transfer. He'll need his credentials, a secure connection. He'll be paranoid. He won't do it from Victoria's apartment. He'll go somewhere he feels safe. Somewhere with a hardline connection he controls. I thought for a moment, my mind racing through everything I knew about him. His habits, his secrets, his father's old office. Midtown. It's been empty for years, but he keeps the lease. It's his private bunker. Okay, I can set up a geofence alert on the network activity around that address. If a connection pings the storage system from there, we'll know. When you get that alert, I need you to do two things. First, trigger a silent alarm at Sterling Thorn, a Level 1 data breach protocol. It will lock down the entire firm network, but subtly. It will look like a system error, but it will create a digital panic, forcing partners and IT to start looking at the logs immediately. And the second thing, the spider you built to look for your watermark, I typed, the one searching for the stolen Axiom files. I want you to point it at one specific place, the Vance and McDowell public servers. Leo was confused, but the data isn't there. It's in a decentralized vault. I know, I typed, a cold, audacious plan forming in my mind. But Julian is about to put it there. I looked down at the ankle monitor, the microphone, the listening device he had used to control me. It was time to turn his own weapon against him. I picked up the landline and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was the direct line to the IT department at Vance and McDowell, a place I should never be calling. A call Julian would be sure to flag. A tired-sounding tech answered. Vance and McDowell IT, how can I help you? Hi, I said, my voice shaking with perfectly feigned panic. My name is Ava Chen. I know this is going to sound crazy, but my husband, Julian Croft, I think he's in some kind of trouble. He's uploading some huge files to your company server, and he looks terrified. He keeps mentioning something about an eternal contract and a dead man's switch. I'm scared. I think someone is blackmailing him. I was planting the seed. I was giving them the breadcrumbs. I was turning Julian's own firm into a search party, and I was giving them the map to the treasure. The performance of a lifetime was about to begin, and I was ready for my closing argument. The hours that followed my call to Vance and McDowell's IT department were the longest of my life. I was a puppeteer who had set her marionettes in motion and could now only wait, hidden in the wings, hoping the strings wouldn't snap. I sat in the dark of my office, headphones on, listening to the dead air from Julian's phone. He was on the move. I heard the sounds of the city, the distant wail of a siren, the low thrum of the subway beneath the streets. He was heading to his father's old office. My prediction had been correct. My own stage was set. I had created the narrative. Julian, the victim of blackmail, forced to upload sensitive data. It was a lie, but it was a plausible lie, and in the world of corporate espionage, plausibility was everything. It was enough to make his own people suspicious, enough to make them start looking. On my secure chat, Leo was a blur of activity. Geofence triggered, he typed. Secure connection established from the Midtown address to the decentralized storage vault. He's accessing the data. Initiate the lockdown at Sterling Thorn, I ordered. Done. Level 1 protocol activated. The system is flagging it as a potential external attack. It's chaos in the IT department. Marcus Thorn is on his way in. Good. My own firm was now on high alert, scouring their systems for a breach that didn't exist, creating a frenzy that would make the subsequent events all the more explosive. Now for my part. I took a deep breath and picked up the landline again. This time, I called Julian's direct line. I knew he wouldn't answer, but that wasn't the point. The point was the voicemail. The point was the recording I knew he would listen to later, the performance for the ankle monitor. Julian, it's me, I began, my voice a torrent of manufactured panic. I'm so sorry, I did something stupid. I panicked. I called your office, your IT department. I told them you were in trouble, that you were being blackmailed. I told them about the NFT, the eternal contract. They said they were launching an investigation. Oh God, Julian, what have I done? Please, please call me back. I'm so scared. I hung up, my hand trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I had just handed Julian the perfect excuse. He now had a reason for his late-night data transfer. His hysterical, unstable wife had compromised his position, and he was trying to contain the damage. He would feel a surge of arrogant confidence, believing he could now control the narrative. He was walking deeper into my web. On my headphone feed, I heard the frantic clicking of a keyboard. He was working fast. Then Leo's message popped up on my screen. He started the transfer, but he's not sending it to an anonymous buyer. Ava, he's uploading the entire Axiom data package directly to a staging server at Vance and McDowell. My heart leaped. It was working. My call had spooked him. He was abandoning the original plan of a discreet transfer to his buyer. Instead, he was moving the data onto his own firm's territory. Why? To control it. To frame it as him securing a dangerous file that his hysterical wife had exposed. He was creating a new alibi in real time. He was brilliant, but so was I, Leo, I typed. Is your spider running? It's running, he confirmed. The moment that data package with my watermark on it hits their public-facing servers, it will be flagged. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. I listened to the furious typing from Julian's end. I watched the progress bar Leo had created on my screen, tracking the massive data transfer. 90%, 95%, 98%. Then two things happened at once. Leo's screen exploded with a flashing red alert. Watermark DETCTED. Location, VANCE and MCDOWELL staging server 4. I've got it, Ava. I've got the stolen data time-stamped on their server with my signature all over it. Simultaneously, through my headphones, I heard Julian let out a low curse. A new voice, calm and authoritative, came through his phone's speaker. He had received a call. Julian, this is Alan Carmichael, head of cybersecurity. We've detected a massive unauthorized data upload to one of our staging servers originating from a legacy network port in the old Croft Industries building. Can you explain what's going on? I could almost see the sweat beading on Julian's forehead. But his voice, when he replied, was smooth as silk. The consummate liar. Alan, thank God, it's a crisis. My wife, she's had a breakdown. She's been making threats. I believe she was being blackmailed with sensitive data related to the Axiom deal. She somehow compromised my credentials and initiated this transfer. I'm here now trying to contain it, to get the data secured before it's released. It was a masterful pivot. He was painting himself as the hero, the victim of his crazy wife's actions. But I had planned for this. Leo, I typed. Now, sending the package, he replied. Leo had prepared an email. It was addressed to Marcus Thorne at my firm and to Alan Carmichael and Victoria Vance at his. The subject line was simple: evidence package, Axiom Helix data breach. The email contained everything. The logs from my ankle monitor, proving Julian had been illegally surveilling me from Vance and McDowell's IP address. The audio file of his conversation with Victoria, where he confessed to the entire scheme and his plan to murder me. And finally, a link to the Vance and McDowell staging server, with a screenshot of Leo's watermark glowing like a beacon on the stolen files. The email concluded with a single sentence. The enclosed was obtained by Ava Chen in the course of defending herself against a conspiracy to frame her and will be delivered to the SEC and the FBI within the hour. Through my headphones, I heard a sharp intake of breath from Alan Carmichael. Julian, he said, his voice now dangerously cold. I've just received an email. You might want to listen. I could hear the faint sound of the audio file playing through the phone. My own voice, Julian's voice, Victoria's voice, echoing in the cavernous office where he thought he was safe. I heard his confession, his cold-blooded plan to have me killed. I heard him condemn himself with his own words. A strangled noise came from Julian. It was the sound of a predator realizing it had walked into a trap. Alan, that's a deep fake, he stammered. Ava is brilliant with tech. She's created this. It's a fabrication. Is it? Carmichael asked. Because our system logs show that the smart contract on your Eternal contract, NFT, was just wiped clean, 30 seconds ago, from your current location. An attempt to destroy evidence, perhaps? Leo. That was Leo's final move. He had accessed the smart contract through a vulnerability he'd found and deleted it, creating an irreversible, time-stamped record of tampering that originated from Julian's own terminal. It was the final nail in the coffin. The line went silent. I could hear Julian's ragged breathing. The game was over. He had lost. Then I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the sound of a heavy desk drawer being wrenched open, the metallic click of a gun being cocked. He has a gun, Leo. I screamed into the secure chat, my carefully constructed composure shattering. Get away from the door, Ava? Frank Miller's voice suddenly boomed through my headphones, not from the feed, but from outside my office. The door to my office burst open. It wasn't Julian. It was Frank, solid and grim, a pistol held firmly in his hand. Behind him were two of his men, armed and ready. "How did you know?" I gasped. "The device I gave you has a panic button," he said, pointing to a small, red button on the side I hadn't noticed. "When you screamed his name, it sent an alert. I've been parked down the street for the last 48 hours. Did you really think I'd let you do this alone?" Through my headphones, I heard the sound of splintering wood as Julian's door was kicked in. Shouts. "NYPD, drop the weapon." A single, deafening gunshot. Then silence. My body started to shake, a violent, uncontrollable tremor as the adrenaline finally gave way to shock. Frank put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Ava," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. "He's down, they got him, it's over." I looked around my office at the law books, the awards, the prison that had become my battlefield, and I knew he was right. I had won. I had survived. The game was over. The aftermath was a maelstrom of flashing blue and red lights, stern-faced detectives, and the clipped, formal language of law enforcement. My brownstone, once a symbol of my imprisonment, was now a crime scene. But this time, I wasn't the accused. I was the survivor. Julian had not been killed. The shot I'd heard was a beanbag round from the NYPD's entry team. They had found him not with the gun pointed at himself, but at the servers in the room, a final, desperate act of a cornered animal trying to destroy the evidence. He was in custody, his world dismantled in the space of a single, catastrophic night. Victoria Vance had been arrested an hour later at her apartment, attempting to board a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty. The days that followed were a blur of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings. The evidence package Leo and I had assembled was airtight. The audio recording, the monitor logs, the watermarked data, the blockchain transaction history. It was an avalanche of proof that buried Julian and Victoria under its weight. Sterling Thorne publicly exonerated me with a fawning press release, hailing my unwavering integrity and brilliant legal mind in uncovering a malicious corporate conspiracy. They offered me my partnership back, along with a substantial raise and a corner office with a better view. I politely declined. I could never go back. That world, with its gleaming towers and hidden rot, was no longer my home. Instead, I used my newfound leverage. With Julian's assets frozen and his reputation in ashes, the balance of power in our pending divorce shifted entirely. But I didn't want his money. I wanted something more. I wanted his shares in Vance and McDowell. He had used the firm as a weapon against me. I would now use it as a tool for change. After a brutal but swift legal battle, I got them. 6 months later, I walked into the Vance and McDowell boardroom not as an enemy, but as the new majority shareholder. The firm was reeling from the scandal, its name tarnished. They needed a new leader, a new direction. And I was it. My first act was to promote Leo Martinez from the IT basement to Chief Technology and Security Officer. My second was to fire every partner who had been complicit, through action or inaction, in Julian's scheme. We rebuilt the firm from the ground up, not on the shifting sands of ruthless ambition, but on the bedrock of ethics and technological innovation. We pioneered new standards for data security and corporate transparency, turning our greatest scandal into our greatest strength. But my real work, my true purpose, began outside the boardroom. I established the Ava Chen Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal and technological aid to victims of domestic abuse, particularly those ensnared in technologically sophisticated forms of control and surveillance. We funded the development of new privacy tools, offered pro bono legal services, and created a network of digital safe houses. I often think about the eternal contract, the NFT that was meant to be a symbol of love but became a weapon of betrayal. In a strange way, it had lived up to its name. The blockchain, with its immutable record, had created a permanent testament to the truth, a truth that could not be erased or denied. It had become a contract for my freedom. Today, my ankle is bare. The faint scar from the monitor has faded, a pale ghost of a memory. I no longer live in the brownstone. I sold it, shedding the last vestiges of that gilded cage. I have a new apartment, smaller, brighter, with a balcony that overlooks the Hudson River. It's a space that is entirely my own. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I look out at the endless river of lights and I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for my freedom, but for the strength I discovered within those four walls. Julian thought he had caged an animal, but he had only managed to trap a warrior. He built a prison to break my spirit, but instead he forged it into steel. This was never just a story about a corporate takedown. It was a story about reclaiming one's voice in a world designed to silence it. It's for every person who has ever felt trapped, watched, and underestimated. Know this: the walls of your prison may seem high, the chains may feel unbreakable, but the most powerful tool you possess is the one they can never take away: your mind. Use it. Sharpen it. Turn it into a key, a weapon, a declaration of your own sovereignty. The game is not over until you decide it is, and you don't lose.